Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Lethal Weapon as well as the season premiere of Bull. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So for example, if you want to hear what I say about the season premiere of Lethal Weapon, you can skip to what I say about the season premiere of Bull. But the first thing I want to talk about is the season premiere of Lethal Weapon. A very good season premiere, picking up literally, it's been like basically time-wise, it's been 2 weeks since season one's finale. Running down some things that basically went down in the beginning. I thought it was kind of interesting, the whole, I thought the whole thing was going to take place in Mexico. I was actually surprised the entire episode didn't. Only the beginning is and the end of it, sure, but I wasn't expecting it to go home. I thought everything was going to go down in this episode, and then they'd bring themselves back home at the end of the episode. But it'd be more it won't be till the next episode that they'd be back home. That's what I was thinking. The whole thing was going to be about in that regard. I guess on some level, I kind of thought it was going to pick up right afterwards. I wasn't kind of expecting that 2 week skip, but yeah, because in my head I was thinking okay, Flores, they're walking him out, they capture him, obviously Murtaugh got Riggs to back down, which I love that whole thing. It's I love you, and you have Riggs kind of almost caught off guard. He's like, what? Did you say you love me? He's like, and you have Murtaugh looking at him okay, don't you have something else to say to me? He's like, no. He's like, come on, man, I opened up to you. It's almost yeah, that's your problem. What do you expect from me? But the fact is, he said, I was okay, it's all set. I knew Riggs wasn't going to go through with it. He wanted to, but if Roger's gotten there any shorter amount of time, then yeah. Also, side note, is it me or I feel like they're killing more people this season so far? I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's been a while since I've seen season one. I don't remember them dropping bodies like that in season one. Maybe they did. Granted, these were cartel guys, so it's you kill them or they're gonna kill you, but it still just kind of messes with my head a little bit. I'm shouldn't that actually? I don't know. Maybe I was just thinking too much about it. Once again, maybe the first season isn't as clear in my head, so maybe that's why. But nevertheless, I thought it was going to be as they're carrying him out. The moment they put him in the trunk, I was oh, I'm surprised. I thought for sure he was going to die then, and it turns into a whole situation of the cartel coming after them in Mexico. I thought that's what the whole thing was going to be about. But like I said, nope, they made it back home. Poor Roger, his finger came with him, but almost didn't make it home. Was not expecting that. And when he was in there bleeding, I was why is he bleeding? It didn't just crush his finger. It's oh no, it chopped off his finger. I'm ugh, that has to suck. So much good stuff overall in this episode. Obviously, the twist that it's actually the second in command, Raul. He's the one that set the whole thing up. There was the nurse that Roger was high on everything. Denise, he ended up telling her about it. Also, there was the people there that was investigating Riggs and Murtaugh, who were talking to Avery. I don't know that actress's name. She's been in so much stuff. She was the mom in Dog with a Blog. I'm pretty sure she was the mom in the real life, The Hard Times at R.J. Berger. She's been in so much stuff. You see her, she's in commercials. I need to learn that actress's name. I see her all over the place. But basically asking all these questions, and I love Avery having to be dodgy and cagey about it. What? Of course we know exactly what they're doing in Mexico. They're fishing. Yep. Just two people who they click so well together. You can't pull them apart. Essentially, obviously, I'm paraphrasing there, but still, it's just it's got to feel a little weird for Avery, basically spewing so much bullshit. And I love too that he gets called out on it later on because it's oh yeah, you tell me all those words, talking about loose cannons and stuff like that. It's no. They described me like that because I was covering for your asses so much that they think I'm the wild card amongst them. It's almost like you guys are normal. I'm the kind of crazy one here or something like that, which is kind of sad. But considering the fact is that he's their boss and he's still around, it kind of goes, you are crazy for still keeping those two together and working over them as their boss. But nevertheless, I was so certain that Denise was behind it, but it's Denise talked to her brother because her brother's border patrol, because she heard in his drugged up state because of getting his finger reattached, he completely messed up and started blabbing his mouth about Flores being in the trunk, and she didn't know they were cops, so that's why she called to her brother. So, but I was so certain she was in on it. So I don't know, because it seemed like they focused so much on the nurse at the beginning. So I was okay, they're focusing on her a little bit too much. It's oh well, that's why. So so really, if it's anyone's fault, it's kind of Murtaugh's fault in that case. But nevertheless, God, so much. I really appreciate too that immediately, because it's kind of interesting because like I said, going back to what I felt like, oh, it's going to be, oh, all of Mexico, like, it's like, no, that storyline was kind of dealt with like immediately. In certain regards, like immediately it's like, okay, Flores is captured and now it's like them back. Flores is dead. And the thing is, immediately you see Riggs kind of like, well, I'm glad he's dead. I wanted him dead anyway, but it's like, no, you wanted to be the one to kill him for everything that he took away from you. But it wouldn't have made any difference. Like, even if he had gotten his revenge, he still would have felt hollow. I think, obviously for Riggs, it's like, if I had been able to kill him, maybe it wouldn't have fixed everything. It definitely wouldn't have brought my wife and my child back. But it would have made me feel like maybe he'd feel something. Because he's even asking multiple people. He's asked Raul. He even asked, isn't Denise's brother, I think his name was Gordon, like even asking him like, how did it feel? Because he needed that like secondhand experience of at least letting me to know what it felt like to take down a person like him. So, but you could tell like he acts like it was okay, but you can tell it definitely bothered him, especially when Cahill showed up. Of course, she'd be like one of the first people to visit him when he's back. And she kind of basically pointed out to him, it's like, Roger sacrificed so much. He's basically putting his job on the line for the sake of going after you. He left his family behind for a while, which caused him some trouble, which I'll kind of get to that in a second. But it's like, he did all that for you. It's like, I didn't ask him to. Well, that's what comes down to people who love you. Even if you don't ask for help, they'll still help you nevertheless, because, in this case, it's like he wanted you to live more than you wanted to, because the whole thing was like, oh, a suicide mission for Riggs. Like, if he was going to die, he was like fine with it as long as he took Flores with him. So, which is just sad, but it's nice that they're reestablishing that already. Like, of course, like Cahill will come to check on him, and it's kind of interesting that she pointed out, she was like, "Oh, his place is better than I thought it was." It's like, right, you've never actually been to his trailer, have you? This is like the first time, because Riggs had it in his head that he was going to quit after this, because for him it's like, well, the only reason why he stayed being a cop was because he wanted revenge for what happened to Miranda, which is actually kind of sad when you break the situation down even more in this episode, because it's like he has no one to, he has the Murtaugh family to rely on, but it's like amongst his own family, because like who he would have like relied on, the only other family he had left, because we still don't really know nothing about Riggs' family. Like, that just never came up. And once again, still have not rewatched the Lethal Weapon movies, even though I've constantly talked about that. I'm still yet to do it. But I don't remember if his family ever came up in the plots of those or not. So I don't know. Maybe he's an orphan or something like that. Maybe it came up in the first season, but because I don't remember like his family ever coming up. So maybe it didn't. Just I don't remember. Like, only family he had was Miranda's family, which they're still her mom and everything, but like, that's a little awkward considering her dad has a part to play in all that situation. I am curious to see, will we see him pop up this season? Like, what's that going to mean for like Riggs, or is this like we're never going to see him again? I am curious about that. But there was also like a monumentous moment for Riggs at the end of the episode, like when it was all said and done, got Raul back, he ended up visiting Miranda's grave, and from the conversation, it seemed like this is his first time subsequently since she died. Who's to say if he actually went to the funeral or not? But it's like a very powerful moment of him just being like, I didn't come before because I knew you wouldn't be proud of the man that I had become. And it's like, oh, you should meet my new partner. He made things a little weird, He almost got some competition because he says he loves me, which is weird. Man's too emotional. But he buried his ring in the grass, which was like, whoa. If you remember, like, that was a big thing last season. Like, he tried to leave his ring behind, but then, like, I forgot what the circumstances were, but it ended up getting lost. That was it. He took it off, but it ended up getting lost. So what he did was he bought a ring that was very similar to it at like a pawn shop or whatever, just because he wasn't ready to let Miranda go. And I think this is an interesting thing, because it's him finally taking those steps forward to like, it's not like he's going to forget her. She will always be the woman that he loves. She will always be important to him. It's not he's ever going to forget her, but it is time for him to kind of put that behind him to a certain extent. Like, he's still a broken man to the point, like, he was like, oh, you got your badge back. She's like, well, we can always talk in, the coffee break room. And she's like, or on the couch. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. She's like, really? Nah, you're not. So we're pitting that back up. It's like, you coming back to duty? You're going to go, talk to me. So that's, which is a good thing, because he isn't fixed, because that's an uphill battle with that. I am curious to see what they do with Riggs this season. Like, he has gotten his revenge. Because to me, I was thinking like, oh, like the whole reason why Flores died was because like, oh, there's someone above him that ordered it. So I thought there was a whole chain to this. It's like, no, it ended with Flores. Like, it's kind of interesting because you would almost think like this would be where they would have ended the season finale, but they kind of left it on a cliffhanger of Riggs getting his revenge. But now that's concluded, so that storyline's done. But it's still like the whole recovery process. Even, revenge dealt with, he's still hollow on the inside because at least the revenge gave him something to pay attention to go forward to. That puts everyone that's connected, with the exception of her dad, like everyone that's connected to Miranda's death is dead now because the actual guy, Riggs killed him in the season finale. Now Flores is dead, not by Riggs' hands, but still. So having to deal with like still being alive, because even he said it to Miranda. He's like, I thought I'd be with you by now, but that Murtaugh bastard, too stubborn to let me die and everything, so. And obviously, this is just focusing on Riggs. Let's talk about Roger himself. Once again, the dynamic of like he was gone for 2 weeks and life kind of moved on a little without him. Trish kind of like held down the household, which she's supposed to because Trish is a BAMF, so like nothing's going to slow her down. But the kids threw a party and everything. It's like, oh, they're graduating and like, oh, RJ's using the grill and everything. And it's just like, Roger kind of snaps and loses it a little bit because things are changing too much. Because Roger's kind of a stickler. He wants things to stay a certain way. These are his babies. He wants them to stay babies. It's like, I'm fine with you growing up, but like, let me be the one to kind of dictate how you grow up and everything. So he kind of digs himself in a hole. He tries to fix things, but then digs himself deeper in a hole and everything like that. Because Trish is like, oh, whoa, what do you mean like things are my fault? And he's like, oh, I'm going to try and make things better. And it's like, oh, you're lucky Riggs showed up when he did, because if he didn't, you would have just been in a whole heap of trouble. And I do appreciate too the whole conversation of like, oh, let's be a little, because he wasn't open. He didn't tell her about the whole finger thing, just like she didn't tell him about the whole everything that's going on back home. But to be fair, it's like she tried to, but he's the one that went off and did this whole go after Riggs, and which she appreciates and loves him for. But it's like, hey, you could be a little more open about it. So it's like, oh, okay, honey, I got to call you back. This guy's here to kill me. And it's like, oh, what's that? What was that sound, Roger? Oh, that was not, we're fine. That was just Riggs blowing up somebody's car with a grenade launcher. It's like, okay, honey, I need you to back up with that. You don't have to, we need to keep some mystery in the relationship. So I thought that was so good. Because Riggs had referenced her getting a new job. I don't remember her actually getting the new job. Did she actually, is that something that happened in time skip in the 2 weeks? I don't remember. Because I remember there was that shady lawyer from season 1 played by, is it Thomas Lennon? Like that crappy lawyer. I remember him offering her a job. Like he's on her billboards. But I don't think she ever took that job officially. Like he kind of just threw her out there. But it's like, I can't remember. Maybe she got a new job. I don't remember. But nevertheless, like our boys are back together again, kind of the dynamic duo. We haven't been introduced to everyone back. Like I said, the only ones is Avery and Bailey. Still no Cruz or Scorsese. No Palmer neither. Because the last time we saw Palmer was the second to last episode of season 1, which I think was episode 17, when she told Riggs the truth. So I'm curious to see them cross paths again, because they haven't talked in the 2 weeks he's been gone. So that's going to definitely be interesting going forward. So, but I'm super excited to have Lethal Weapon back. I'm very curious to see what they do with this season. Like I said, like the whole Miranda situation dealt with to a certain extent. Like obviously Riggs still got his issues, but I'm curious to see what storylines we deal with this season. It doesn't seem like it's that type of show that's going to have like a main threat per se. Because even the whole like Miranda situation only kind of circumvented, like it came back at like towards the end. It was kind of an overarching thing, sure. But that's because most of the time he spent thinking it was an accident. But then he finds out it was actually a hit. And now it's just kind of like, it's kind of like an almost like arguably an episodical thing. There's overarching stories, but I feel like, I don't know, because there's certain things I brought up last season that I'm curious to find out more about, like Cruz. Like they set up some interesting thing about him. Like I'm like trying to find out more about him, because they've been very vague about his like past and everything, but there's been hints to it in season 1. More about Bailey, because I'm a sucker for like, oh man, a crime drama. This is the perfect show to dive into other people's characters. Cause I feel like I don't know. I feel like they ignore me on that. Also Scorsese, because Scorsese's such a weirdo enigma. I'm curious to learn about him too. Like I'm waiting for everyone to have their episodes to be like, yeah, this is my story arc. Because like last season we had Avery, we had Cahill having her own episode, like story arc kind of thing. So I'm curious to see what happens to everyone, as well as our main boys. To see what kind of mischief they get into this season. So. And now moving on to the season premiere of Bull, a great premiere. Certain things kind of immediately got to point out. The whole Bull and Diana situation. I wasn't 100% sure where they stood in season 1. Like, it seemed like they were dating, but then it was kind of like a no, it's not them dating. And then the whole JP thing came up, which we haven't seen JP yet, but there's always a possibility she might show up again this season. But it seems like we might be seeing a lot more of Diane this season. I mean, obviously she kind of alluded to it this episode. She's like, oh, I will most definitely be back because, you know, it's like, I'm not done with you, you know, Bull. So, it seems like they really don't bother labeling their relationship, but it's like boyfriend, girlfriend, even though they're kind of a boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, I'm going all over the place, but I mean, let's break everything down that went down in the episode. First of all, was the whole situation at the beginning. The moment that the character's name was like Marcus Clayton, but the moment I was like, Dennis from Preacher. If you haven't watched Preacher, you should watch Preacher. It's a good show. Nevertheless, that was scary, and just how calm, cool, and calculated she did that. It didn't even correlate in my head that she did that until later on in the episode. I was like, oh yeah, it's like, she didn't do that, did she? Because it's like, I should have caught that from the beginning, because she didn't shred the gloves until like the very, after everything was said and done. You know, I don't necessarily remember her having them on when she shot him. Maybe they cut away from that. I don't know. I definitely remember she shredded the gloves afterwards. But still, nevertheless. But the fact is, going to the extent that she did, stabbing herself. And what makes it worse, it's later on when Bull sets up that whole deal of like, oh, they'll give you $500 million to like just to walk away from this whole situation. She's like, oh yeah, you know what went through my mind? Oh, the fact of the matter is the pain, and then like, how could the person that supposedly loves me do this to me? And it's like as a person who knows the whole situation, is like, you are just the worst. You got such a stone-faced lie. I mean, like, you're so calculated with it, and it's like, even Bull said it sounds very rehearsed. There are moments where because even when she's near the end of the episode, she's explaining her injuries to like the jury and stuff like that, she constantly pointed it out. It's like, yeah, I got stabbed here, oh yeah, and it was like a few centimeters away from my heart. It's like, I don't know, like, I mean, logistically, you want the jury to really understand what went down, so they're a little more sympathetic. Sure, I mean, that situation is not like you need to be sympathetic. It's like, you got stabbed 3 times. Like, I think people are already enough on your side, but it's just the way her demeanor, her way of handling it is like, you can tell, like, you can look at her and be like, she is playing up the crowd and stuff. She's trying to play up the sympathy, but she's like, nah, I'm not going to just take this $500 million. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take everything, because the company's worth like $6 billion. Which is kind of interesting. Like, obviously, like, the kids kind of play a certain extent. Like, Marcus has like full-grown kids who don't want her to get anything, which is like, I'm surprised they never actually popped up in the episode. You just kind of dealt with the more corporate side of things, like the lawyers and stuff like that, the people handling the whole situation, paying Bull and his team. Which, that's another element that came up in this episode that I thought was kind of interesting, is the fact is that Tack is kind of broke. That's kind of interesting to me, but I guess it's like, to me, I was like, you have a lot of big time clients, but I guess a lot of occasions they work for the underdog. So I'm like, is that really beneficial for them? But it's like, oh no, like, they do have big clients, because that was always a thing he brought up last season, was like, you take the big clients so you can handle those smaller cases that no one else will really take. Like, you need to have the money to keep the lights on so you can help the people that really need to be helped as well. So every once in a while that means taking on corporate things. Because there's that whole episode, that Cable had a big problem with him working with that sad company. Wasn't that like this? That was like one of the last episodes in the seasons, I'd say. One of like the second or third to last episode of the season, I think, was that whole Cable episode. And then, nevertheless, but it's like, he wants to keep Chunk around because Chunk is like, you know, going to law school and everything, but it's costly to live here and keep his job as well as also study and go to class. It's like, that's too much. And it's like, Bull's like, oh, I want to give everyone a raise. And Marissa's like, what are you talking about? There's not enough money. You got this like $250,000 from those guys. Oh, that's great. That's enough to keep this up. Because Bull kind of broke things down. It's like once again, it's like, I feel like they never really answer the whole money situation too much. But it's like, when you look at their operation, and especially the way they explain it, it's like, that's a very expensive operation. There's a lot of employees to pay. The equipment is not cheap. Plus, Bull kind of he brought up something interesting too, like keeping up appearances, because he's meeting with lawyers. And it's like, if he looked like like any Joe Schmo, they wouldn't give him the time of day because he has to stay well dressed, stay in certain places, to keep up the credibility of making it look even more of a legit business. But if, he cut back on that, then maybe people are less likely to cut. Like, even his reputation is one thing, but if he doesn't fit the part, a lot of people will just not believe in him and just kind of back away. So it's like there's an element. I mean, that's kind of Chunk's whole part of it too. Like, you dress to fit the situation. That's what he does for their clients and stuff. Fit them up so that they present a certain image for the jury to kind of get the jury on their side. So it's that whole situation too that it works for Bull as well in that particular circumstance. So he wants to keep Chunk on, but nevertheless, this whole thing for him. Because ultimately he ended up snapping at both Diana as well as Danny, because Danny made that slip up. But it's like, you asked me to check out a crap ton of people, like 15 people in a short amount of time. You're going to give me a limited amount of time. So it's like, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have snapped at me like you did. To me, I chalked it up to Bull, but it's a combination of like him being stressed out because he's going up against Diana, because Diana's kind of like his kryptonite and everything. Because he even points it out during like when they're selecting jury members. It's like, yeah, she knows our game plan a lot. She knows how we work. So kind of not one of the best people to go up against. This is their third time going up against her. So plus there's a whole relationship aspect to it. Plus Bull is the way he is. He just doesn't like to lose. Plus there's a whole money side of things. Because if he wins, that means he can get the money to keep chunking as well as make sure everyone stays happy. Because the fact of the matter is, Bull spent so much time building and crafting his team from a very detached manner. You can be like, well, he crafted this team perfectly and he wouldn't want to get anyone else. But two, it's like this group is also like, the more emotional side of it. This is his family, and he doesn't want to lose or replace any of them because they all play a big part into not only the team, but I think also for him, because I think they represent they represent everything he can't do, because even as smart as he is, he can't do everything that they do. Like, they are very good in their fields, just like he's very good in his hits, and he needs each one of them to work with him to complete the puzzle that makes up the tag team. Like, that's me kind of overextending on it like that, but nevertheless, you get my point, hopefully. So of course he's not going to want to lose. So I'm lose like Chunk or anyone. So I guess all that combined together just kind of, and plus he thought Diana was screwing him over. So going back to the whole not wanting to lose thing, which I love that turned out. I was wondering, was there anything to that? Because it's like, oh, the girl that he put so much stock in, it's like, oh, look at her, she can sell people anything. It's like, oh, it's almost pornographic. It was like, you're getting a little too excited for this boy. It's like, I think I'm in love about that particular juror. But it's like, whoa, where are you from? She's like, Callista, Texas. It's like, oh. And it turns out that ended up just being a huge coincidence, which is very interesting. I guess it kind of plays into Bull's paranoia and stuff like that. But because Danny was basically like, okay, I'll help you out this time. But you throw something at me like that, again, you'll regret it. He's like, yeah, I'm stupid, not a moron, so like I say, that's where I chalk it up, because Bull kind of which is weird because you usually see him as being the calm, cool, and collected, but like I said, so much was at stake in this particular case. It's not like if they lost the case, they wouldn't have lost everything, but it's still a situation of once again, still trying to keep the team together. I don't think he really let anyone in on the whole thing behind that. So I do also appreciate the fact of what this episode meant. This isn't just oh man, me and Diana, we're going at it friendly. It's like, nah, she was super pissed. She's like, oh, you're working for the opposite side. I was like, I want you on my team, because she's like, I want to make a name for herself here in New York. Things kind of didn't really work out that much in Callista, considering the fact that she kind of, because things didn't work out for her in Callista, she kind of lost, so her reputation kind of sank a little bit. So she wanted to make a name for herself, taking on Kara's case, Miss Clayton. But Bull was like, yeah, I'm working for the other side. And she got super pissed. She was like, quit. He's like, I can't. That's unethical. And then she just is like, well, goodbye. Yeah, I guess we'll see each other in the courtroom. And it's like, wow. Even when he was chasing after her, it's like, oh, yeah, I don't know this man. He's stalking me. She was super pissed. And he's like, what do you want me to do? I legally can't. It's not right to do what you're asking me to do. It's almost like she's almost like, well, you're my boyfriend, essentially. You need to do what I'm asking you to do. It's like, you expect me to just do what you want, you just snap your fingers. It's just kind of interesting. I think that's why they kind of go hand in hand, because she doesn't like to lose and he doesn't like to lose either. So, but the fact of the matter is also because I think on some level she's like, oh yeah, it'd be kind of cute us working together. We're like the power couple. We'll take down any defense. Say, oh, you're only opposing side. Huh. why didn't you talk to me about this first? It's almost like, well, it's not like you asked me about this whole situation first. I didn't know that this is what you were going to do. So that was just kind of interesting. But I do major props to Benny, obviously working together with Bull and the whole team, but tearing Kara out, like, down and just being like, oh, what did you study? Oh, right, that's right, anatomy. Knowing exactly where, and then you know, I love him tearing her down because it's like like I said, she put up this sympathetic front and just being like, you know, it's like, oh, you happen to use a gun that just happened to be on a table, fully loaded and everything. It's like, oh, that's so interesting because the places you got struck were exactly places to avoid vital organs too. Like your husband wasn't some anatomy person, but you were. So you set this whole thing up. So I thought that was just kind of interesting because I think there's very few cases in season 1, to my recollection, where they really like gave you like the rundown of things of like, oh, this is clear cut the crime. Like usually you kind of have to work backwards a little bit to gotta see how everything unfolds. Like something bad will happen, sure, but it's like you kind of have to work with the team to kind of figure out like what went down. In this particular case, we as the audience knew immediately. It was just up to them to kind of prove what she did. So this is actually one of those few occasions where Bull and them are like immediately taking down like a bad person. Because sometimes, a lot of times, it's like they start off representing the bad person and then they have to kind of like find some wiggle room to take down said bad person. So there's that whole angle of it. So it's like that definitely went down in the season finale. But like it doesn't come up that often. So it's interesting that they kind of start their finale, like their premiere off of that too. So like I said, I'm interested to see. I'm glad to have Bull back, but I'm very interested to see like what stories we get told this season. Some things I'm looking forward to. Hopefully they do a little more diving into Bull. We've picked up stuff here and there, but Bull is not big on sharing stuff about himself. He drops stuff here and there, about having a sister and stuff like that, his family situation. We really haven't dived too deeply into it. Like his father didn't pop up. His father was mentioned, but never really popped up at all during season 1. So I'm curious to see will he pop up this season, as well as what other stories lie in wait for other people this season as well. Because in retrospect, pretty much everyone had their moments last season too, like their own particular cases. Kind of like what I was alluding to with Lethal Weapon. Like everyone kind of had their own story arcs and stuff last season. So I'm kind of interested to see where they go this season as well, Like, for example, the whole, Bull and Diana situation. I'm curious to see, how that progresses. Because over the course of the series so far, this is, our first time ever really seeing Bull in a relationship. Because, obviously, going into the series, little flirtiness between him and Diana and little flirtiness between him and JP. But we never actually got to see him in a relationship. Because by the time the series started, he was already divorced from Benny's sister, Isabella. So there's also this whole aspect of Chunk, working, trying to become a lawyer and everything like that, which I thought that whole aspect, what he was going to bring up to Bull, I thought was like, okay, let me take over, let me do Benny's job. I thought that's what he was going to try and do, but it turns out that's not the case. I mean, maybe that's something we'll see in the future as he progresses further down the line, that eventually that'll happen and he'll be like, okay, I'm gonna try and do Benny's job, and maybe there'll be a moment, an episode where everyone has to switch jobs. I think that'd be kind of a cool dynamic. It seems like something Bull might actually do too, make everyone take different jobs, kind of see what it's like to be everyone else's job. Maybe there's a point where people are like, doing what you do is not that hard, which the team doesn't seem like they're like that. Like everyone respects what everyone does. It's like, you do this and you do that, you're very good at, I can never do that. But like I said, we'll see. Maybe there'll be a situation in the future where Bull thinks the situation calls for everyone to switch jobs. And I'd love to see a storyline like that. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.